Good morning, everybody, and thank you very, very much for a generous welcome. Delighted to be here. Mr. Deputy President, we're delighted that you were able to make it. We understand that the President is at the G7, where he's conducting important business, so we appreciate that very much. Distinguished friends, Cabinet Secretary Joe Ho, Governor Nasser, I'm a child like you of the ocean. I know what you're talking about. And I particularly want to thank the World Resources Institute and Cynthia Barzona, who you heard from a moment ago, who's been stewarding this process so that we truly know what people are doing or not doing. And I think it's important. Now, I want you to know I'm scared stiff because somehow in the process of these last few years, I turned 80, and I don't know how that happened. I have no clue. I don't know how it happened, but what I'm doing now is not only trying to save the ocean, I'm trying to prove to people that 80 is the new 55. So stay with me, okay? I want to thank the government of Kenya profoundly for creating this event, which is the first ever Oceans Conference on African soil, as you heard earlier. And it's not because Kenya is arriving late to this challenge. In fact, Africa is helping to lead it, as you'll hear in a moment. 14 years ago, when we launched the Hour of Ocean Conference with President Obama and I was Secretary of State, I said something that, and I don't quote myself, but I said something that I think is important for all of us to focus on. And that is, and it's as true today as it was 14 years ago, we can't have a healthy planet unless you have a healthy ocean. It is linked inextricably together. And so, think about what the ocean does for us every single day. The ocean produces roughly half the oxygen that we breathe. It feeds more than 3 billion people. It supports the livelihoods, the jobs for hundreds of millions more people. And it carries approximately 80% of global trade, with some negative implications for what happens in the ocean. Perhaps most remarkably, my friends, the ocean absorbs roughly 90% of the excess heat that is trapped on the planet because of greenhouse gas emissions. About a quarter of the carbon pollution that humanity emits every single year, the ocean consumes. In other words, the ocean has actually been acting as Earth's life support system. And it's been protecting us. And the question before us as we come here to Kenya for this important meeting is whether we are willing to protect the ocean in return. Because the ocean is sending us a very, very clear message. The science is no longer warning us about a future problem. The science is describing a present reality. Ocean temperatures have repeatedly reached record high levels. I mean, off the coast of Florida last year, 101 degrees Fahrenheit off Key West. That's the ocean. That's as hot as a hot tub, which has to be gas-fired in order to get to that heat. More than 1/3 of the world's fish stocks are harvested at biologically unsustainable levels. And scientists now estimate that roughly half the world's coral reefs are already lost or severely degrading. The vast majority of the remaining reefs could be at risk between the lifespan now of today's young people. And Africa has more young people than any other place. If we don't sort of take note of this, I don't have a bad metaphor, but putting your head in the sand and pretending it's not happening is not a solution. It's an invitation for disaster. And we see insurance companies pulling out now in various places in America. They won't insure homes that are by the sea because of sea level rise and the increased intensity of the storms. And we don't just care about the reefs because they're pretty to scuba dive on or to look at. We care because the reefs are essential spawning grounds, important to the life cycle of everything in the ocean. We also care that millions of tons of plastic, you saw it a few minutes ago on one of the photos here, millions of tons of plastic enter the ocean every single year, and it breaks down into microplastics. And almost every human being on the planet is taking microplastics into our bodies. Now, I can't prove it, but you might ask yourself the question of why there's so much more pancreatic cancer. Why is there so much more lung cancer and so forth? So we also care because millions of tons of that plastic is trapped in various parts of the ocean where it has no way to get out unless we take it out. The climate crisis is not only warming the ocean, it's changing its own chemistry more than it has been changed in millions of years. And it is we human beings who are either making the choice or choosing not to make a choice that is what is creating this crisis. None of this is happening in theory anymore. When I started working on this issue, Al Gore and I were young senators, our first term, in 1985, and Reagan was president. And we became involved because Jim Hansen, a NASA scientist, testified to us, this is happening. That was in 1986, 85. We all went to Rio. We went to various parts of the world, Kyoto, you name it, to negotiate. But too many people still push back and fight and throw money to the wrong side of this challenge. I have personally seen the cost of climate change because I've traveled the world. I went to Antarctica, I went to the Arctic, I went to Svalbard off Norway. I've been all around our planet. And I have seen the costs of climate change up close and personal. But I've also seen something else. I'm not here to scold. I'm not here to scare. Because I do believe we can still solve this problem. We still have the power to do it. And I've seen something else all around the world. And you're seeing it right here today in this meeting. Leadership, innovation, determination. Because while Africa has contributed the least of any part of the world to this crisis, it is increasingly now helping to lead the world's response. And that leadership is on display here today, tomorrow, yesterday. That's why bringing our ocean to Mombasa is so important. Not simply because of geography, but because this coastline actually reminds us of something pretty fundamental. For centuries, long before climate summits and international conferences, the waters of the Indian Ocean connected Africa to the wider world through trade, culture, exchange. And the ocean has always connected us, my friends. The great poets of everybody's nation have always touched on the power of the ocean. The challenge before us is not a lack of knowledge. We know exactly what is happening. The challenge is whether political will can finally catch up with the science. Because every major issue governments are wrestling with today actually has an ocean dimension. Energy security, food security, economic growth, trade, national security, climate stability. And the ocean is not on the sidelines of the world's biggest challenges. It's at the center of them. And that's what makes these meetings exciting, the energy, the dynamic that you bring to the table. And as we look forward to COP31, one lesson really should be clear. The ocean can no longer be an afterthought in climate policy, and it has been. For decades, it has quietly absorbed our heat and our carbon. And I had the privilege of leading our negotiating team in Paris, in Glasgow, in Sharm el-Sheikh, and finally in Dubai. And we made the most bold statement of all in Dubai. We must transition away from fossil fuel so as to achieve the other things we need to achieve. That choice, my friends, must be reflected in the choices we offer our people, no matter what country you come from. The ocean can no longer be an afterthought. Now it must become central to our climate solutions. And that includes protecting and restoring blue carbon ecosystems, such as mangroves, while also protecting coastlines, sustaining fisheries, and strengthening local economies. So here's what I think the challenge is as you meet today and tomorrow and try to, by the way, as you lay out very specific things that each of you have chosen to do with real money on the table and real effort. First, we must make 30 by 30 real. Protecting 30% of the world's ocean by 2030 is not a slogan. It requires new marine protected areas, and the resources necessary to enforce them. It doesn't do any good just to stand up and say, well, we're creating a marine protected area here, but you don't protect it. In too many parts of the world, right now we're at about 3% of the world's announced marine protected areas are actually fully protected. About 10% we have covered in some way, which is great. It's a step forward. We made progress when we set aside the Ross Sea, and now we're working on the next steps. Thirdly, we must bring the High Seas Treaty from promise to practice. And the agreement represents one of the most important advances in ocean governance in a generation. Now governments must ratify it, and about 90 have, so it's in effect, but everybody needs to join in implementing it. Fourth, we must intensify the fight against illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, a practice that robs coastal communities of billions of dollars, a practice that undermines honest fishermen, and that threatens food security around the world. So finally, my friends, we must dramatically increase investment in resilience, adaptation, and blue carbon ecosystems. And nobody's happy that we have to do that, but the reality is if we don't do that, many more people are going to get hurt, and everybody's going to pay more in order to clean up a mess. Everything I just laid out is not an environmental goal. It's an economic goal. It's a security goal. It's a development goal. And yes, it's a climate goal. But when we launched this conference in 2014, we wanted more than speeches. We wanted people to come to the table with an announcement of specifically what they will do and when and how much it will cost. And that's what Cynthia and Bazuna and the World Resources and others are looking at. We know what's happening now with this money. Some of this has gone to financial aid, some of it to programmatic assistance, some of it through businesses, philanthropies, scientists, civil society, have all initiated thousands of commitments, folks. 41% of these commitments have been completed. Tell me another conference that produces that kind of result. 41% are in progress, and only 18% are yet to commence. What's important is that we are tracking, the Secretariat is watching, helping, not punitively, but trying to reach out and help you be able to reach the goal and achieve what we want to achieve. So no one came to Mombasa to take a victory lap. The ocean continues to absorb roughly 90% of the excess heat that is generated by global climate change. It continues to feed more than 3 billion people. It continues to carry approximately 80% of all the trade, as I said. The question is whether we humans who present the problems that it faces are going to do the things that we need to do to win this challenge. So let this conference be remembered, not simply as the first Our Ocean Conference held in Africa. Let it be remembered as the conference that moved the world from commitments to implementation. The measure of our success is not going to be in speeches. It'll be in the reefs that we save. It'll be in the fisheries that we restore. It'll be in the mangroves that we protect or plant, the marine protected areas we establish and enforce, and the future we leave to the next generation. The ocean has been humanity's silent ally for generations. The time has come for humanity to become the ocean's ally, and strangely enough, in our own interest. The ocean has given humanity immeasurably more than we ever acknowledge. Now it's our turn to act on the ocean's behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency John F. Kerry, for highlighting the weight of this conference and also what needs to be achieved, and I'm sure it's going to be achieved. Your Excellency, the Deputy President, allow me to now invite the Cabinet Secretary for Mining, Blue Economy and Maritime Affairs, Honorable Ali Hassan Joho. Clap for him, please. Welcome, Waziri.
Your Excellency, Professor Kithure Kindiki, Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya,